For 15 years, I thought my dad was dead. We had a funeral. We cried. We moved on. Then one afternoon, I ran into him buying groceries in the next city over. Alive, laughing, living a whole new life. My world stopped right there in the frozen food aisle. And the worst part? I realized some people in my family had known the truth the whole time. That's when everything I believed about loyalty, family, and love came crashing down. I was in the middle of something as ordinary as grocery shopping when my world cracked open. I'd finished work late, and instead of going to my usual store, I stopped at a supermarket one town over. Just a quick errand before heading home. I was tired, scrolling through my list on my phone, not really paying attention to the people around me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man by the fruit section. My chest tightened instantly. He wasn't just anyone. He looked exactly like my father. The father who, according to everything I'd been told since I was a kid, had been dead for 15 years. At first, I froze. My brain tried to catch up with my eyes. I thought it's a coincidence. Just someone with the same build, the same jawline. But then he turned, and I saw his profile. The same way his nose curved slightly. The way he scratched at his chin, exactly the way my father used to. My stomach lurched. I wanted to dismiss it, but the details wouldn't let me. He had a small scar on his left hand, right below the thumb. I remembered that scar. He got it when he was fixing a bike for me when I was 8. That memory rushed back so violently I had to grip the shopping cart to stay steady. I whispered under my breath, "No, that's impossible." My rational side started screaming. My father was gone. We had a funeral. I stood at the cemetery with my mom, my relatives, everyone dressed in black. I threw dirt onto his coffin. I cried for weeks. There was no way he was standing 10 feet away from me, alive and casually picking out apples. But my body didn't care about rational explanations. My heart was hammering in my chest so hard I thought other people could hear it. My hands were shaking as I fumbled to take out my phone, half thinking I'd snap a picture, half terrified of being caught staring. Then it got worse. He laughed. Just a casual, warm laugh at something the cashier said. It wasn't just a face, it was his voice. Low, a little rough, the exact voice I thought I'd never hear again. I backed up so quickly I nearly crashed into a shelf of cereal. My first instinct was to run, to get out before he saw me. But part of me wanted him to turn and notice me, to meet my eyes and explain everything. He never looked my way. He bagged his groceries, thanked the cashier, and walked out. I stood there frozen, watching him push the cart through the sliding doors. I didn't follow him. My legs refused to move. I just stood there, replaying the moment, convinced I'd finally lost my mind. Because if it was my dad, if he really was alive, then it meant someone in my family had been lying to me for 15 years. And that thought scared me more than anything else. But that was just the beginning. The drive home from that supermarket felt like the longest 30 minutes of my life. My brain was running on a loop, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. By the time I parked in front of my apartment, I'd convinced myself it had to be a trick of the light. A look-alike. Some random guy who happened to have the same scar, the same voice, the same laugh. I told myself, "You're tired. You're stressed. Don't spiral." But lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him laughing by the fruit aisle. My dad. Alive. The next morning, I tried to brush it off. Coffee, work, emails, pretend nothing happened. But by lunch, I caved. I opened my laptop and started searching. I didn't even know what exactly I was looking for. His name? His old job? An obituary? No, an obituary would have been pointless. We already had one. Still, I typed his full name into a public records site. My heart skipped when a listing popped up. Same first and last name. Same middle initial. Same date of birth. Address? The next city over. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. It couldn't be. Records can be wrong. People can share names. But birthdays? That was too exact. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. So I cross-checked. Voter registration. Same name, same birthday. Active. The man I buried 15 years ago had apparently been casting ballots. I pushed my chair back and pressed my hands against my face. My pulse was racing. The logical side of me fought back. Maybe this was a clerical error. Maybe someone had stolen his identity. Maybe. But then I thought of the scar, the voice, the laugh. All the maybes crumbled. That night, I went further. I scrolled through social media, searching his name. At first, nothing. Then I found a profile, locked, barely any photos, but the banner image made my throat close up. It was him, standing with a woman and two kids. Kids who looked around 10 and 12. I clicked through the few public posts. Birthday cakes. Soccer games. A caption. So proud of my boy. His boy. My vision blurred. My dad. The man who supposedly died when I was barely old enough to drive, had a whole other family just a short drive away. I slammed the laptop shut. My hands were shaking so badly, I spilled the glass of water on my nightstand. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe my brain was stitching memories into someone else's face. But in my gut, I knew. I knew it was him. And the thought that chilled me to the bone wasn't just that he was alive. It was that someone close to me had known all along. Because secrets that big don't stay buried for 15 years without help. Then I found something that confirmed my worst fears. I didn't sleep that night. I kept pacing from my bed to the kitchen, sipping water I couldn't swallow, refreshing that social media page like it would suddenly change. Every time I saw his face smiling with those kids, I felt like I was looking at some twisted alternate universe where he was alive, but not for me. Alive for them. By morning, I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. I needed something undeniable. Not a profile picture, not a voter record. Proof. Hard, physical proof. So I drove back to that city. My chest was pounding the whole way, like I was about to commit a crime. I parked a few blocks away from the address I'd pulled from the records, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn off the ignition. It was a modest house. White siding, small front yard, a basketball hoop set up in the driveway. There was a car parked outside, and I recognized the license plate letters from a flash of memory. My dad used to have a custom plate with his initials. Different numbers now, but the same pattern. My knees nearly buckled just standing there. I told myself I'd just watch. Just confirm. Nothing more. I leaned against a lamppost, pretending to check my phone, when the front door opened. And there he was. No blurry photos, no tricks of memory. My father. Older, grayer, but unmistakably him. He carried a bag of trash down the driveway. The way he walked, the slight limp in his left leg, it was all there. My body reacted before my brain. My stomach twisted, and I doubled over, fighting nausea. It was like watching a ghost take out the garbage. Then two kids burst through the doorway, laughing, chasing each other with backpacks. He looked at them the way I always wished he'd looked at me. Warm, protective, present. He ruffled the boy's hair, kissed the girl on the forehead, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back toward my car, trying to hold it together, but my vision blurred with tears. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it so tightly my knuckles went white. My whole body was trembling. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a look-alike. This wasn't identity theft. My father was alive. He'd been alive this whole time. And he hadn't just abandoned me. He'd built an entirely new family, just 30 minutes away. I thought back to his death. The funeral, the coffin, the tears. I remembered my mother sitting beside me, holding my hand, whispering that we'd get through it together. I remembered relatives sending cards, neighbors bringing food, the whole neighborhood treating us like victims of tragedy. If he was here, then what had we buried? An empty coffin? A stranger? A lie wrapped in ceremony? The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My chest ached so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. 15 years of grief, of unanswered questions, of growing up without a father, all of it had been stolen from me, replaced with a carefully orchestrated performance. I wanted to storm up to that house, pound on the door, scream in his face. Why? Why did you do this? Why let me mourn you when you were just down the road? But I couldn't move. I sat frozen in the car, tears streaming, until he drove off with the kids in the back seat. Normal. Casual. Like nothing was wrong. I stayed parked there long after, trying to steady my breathing. My head spun with questions I couldn't answer. Did my mom know? Did my uncles and aunts? Who else had played along with this giant charade? I finally started the engine and drove away, but the road blurred with tears. I had confirmation. My father wasn't dead. He'd chosen to erase me from his life, and my family had chosen to help him do it. The worst part? I couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not without knowing who had lied and who had been fooled, just like me. And that thought made me feel more alone than I ever had in my entire life. I wasn't ready for what I was about to discover. The confirmation should have brought clarity. Instead, it made the ground under me even shakier. For days, I walked around like a ghost myself, barely eating, barely sleeping, just replaying that moment outside his house. I thought the worst part was knowing he'd chosen another life. But the real poison was the gnawing suspicion that someone I loved had helped him hide it. I started small. I asked my mom questions I pretended were casual. Where certain documents from the funeral were, who handled the arrangements, why I couldn't remember seeing the body clearly. Her answers were always quick, rehearsed, like she'd told the story 1,000 times. Of course you saw him. You were young, in shock. Don't dwell on it. Every word was too polished. The more she deflected, the more certain I became. She knew. Maybe not every detail, maybe not the extent of his new life, but she knew he wasn't 6 feet under. Still, accusing her outright felt impossible. I needed a softer target, someone who might slip. So I called my uncle, my dad's older brother. He'd always been the loud one at family gatherings, a little too fond of whiskey, a little too careless with secrets. If anyone would let something slip, it would be him. We met at a diner halfway between our towns. I pretended it was just a check-in, a how are you doing these days kind of lunch. But I didn't waste time. Halfway through his burger, I asked, did you ever feel weird about Dad's death? Like, something never added up. He froze. Just for a second, but I caught it. His hand hovered in midair, fries suspended like a freeze frame. Then he chuckled, too loudly. What kind of question is that? I pushed. I mean, there was no open casket. No autopsy I ever saw. And don't you think it's strange how fast everything happened? One day he's gone. The next there's a funeral. His laugh was thinner this time. You were a kid. You don't remember right. But I did remember. Too well. The way no one ever said what exactly killed him. The way the neighbors whispered but never asked questions. I leaned closer. I saw him. My voice cracked on the words. I saw him alive. Don't tell me I imagined that. My uncle's face drained of color. He set down his fork, rubbed his temple, and muttered, damn it. That was it. That slip was all I needed. I pressed harder. My sleep became impossible. Nights stretched into endless loops of anger and confusion. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the same questions on repeat. Why did he leave? Why did they lie? Why was I the only one forced to live inside a script someone else had written? One moment, I'd feel like marching straight to my father's doorstep, demanding answers with my fists if I had to. The next, I'd collapse into shame, wondering if I even had the right. Maybe I wasn't enough for him. Maybe I was the flaw he tried to erase when he started over. That thought hollowed me out like nothing else. During the day, I drifted through life on autopilot. Emails, small talk, traffic lights. I caught myself zoning out in conversations, people's mouths moving while my brain screamed, 15 years. 15 years of lies. The worst part was the silence between me and my mother. Every time I looked at her, I wanted to spit the truth in her face. I know he's alive. I know you lied. But the words stuck in my throat. If I said it, everything would detonate. The fragile normal she built would crumble, and maybe I wasn't ready for that fallout. So I paced at night, chewing over impossible choices. Expose her? Confront him? Pretend I never saw him? None of it gave me peace. Eventually, a grim clarity set in. Doing nothing wasn't an option. The lies had already shredded my childhood, and if I let them stand, they'd poison whatever future I had left. So I made a decision. I would confront him directly, alone. No buffer, no family politics, no more whispered half-truths. Just me and him, face to face. I didn't know what I'd say. I didn't know if I'd scream or break down or just sit in silence. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep carrying a ghost that wasn't even dead. I spent sleepless nights planning. Finally, I knew what I had to do. I didn't tell anyone. No warnings, no hints. One Saturday morning, I just got in my car and drove back to that house. My hands gripped the wheel so hard they cramped, but I refused to turn back. If I didn't do it now, I never would. I parked half a block away and sat there, watching the front door like it was the entrance to another world. My heart hammered so loud it drowned out the hum of the engine. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but I forced myself out of the car. The air felt heavier as I walked up the driveway. My knees wobbled. My throat went dry. I rang the doorbell before I could second-guess myself. The door opened, and there he was. My father. Close enough that I could see the wrinkles carved deeper into his face, the gray spreading through his hair. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I swear the world went silent. He blinked, stunned. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Oh God. His voice cracked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse. Instead, I croaked out one word. Why? He stepped outside quickly, shutting the door behind him as if to shield the family inside. His hands trembled. I didn't think, he stopped, swallowed hard. I didn't think you'd ever find me. I almost laughed. Find you? You live 30 minutes away. You weren't hiding in another country. You were right here. My voice shook, but my anger was sharp. He rubbed his face, sighing. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Your mother and I, we agreed it would be easier if. Easier. I cut him off. Easier for who? You got to start over, build a new family, while I grew up thinking you were in the ground. I buried you. Do you get that? His face crumpled, guilt written across every line. I'm sorry. I thought disappearing would hurt less than staying. I thought if you believed I was gone, you could move on. My chest tightened, fury and grief twisting together. I didn't move on. I mourned. For years. Every birthday, every holiday, I carried your absence like a stone. And all this time, you were alive, laughing with your new kids. His shoulders sagged. He whispered, I never stopped loving you. I almost broke then. Almost. But the words felt hollow, too little, too late. Behind the door, I heard footsteps, voices. A child's laugh. He flinched, glanced back, then looked at me with desperation. Please. Not here. They don't know. Not like this. I stared at him, my throat burning with unspoken words. The father I'd grieved for half my life was begging me to keep his secret, again. I wanted to explode. But part of me also craved answers, any answers, even whispered ones. So I stepped back, nodding stiffly. Fine. Not here. But this isn't over. He exhaled in relief, like I'd just spared him from a firing squad. Thank you. I didn't thank him back. I turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. For a moment, I thought maybe this was the start of something. Answers, closure, maybe even a fragile kind of peace. But deep down, I knew better. I thought it was over. I couldn't have been more wrong. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of calm. I'd confronted him. I'd looked him in the eye. No more shadows, no more wondering if I'd lost my mind. He was alive, and he admitted it. Twisted as it was, that felt like progress. The days that followed were quieter. I went to work, I ate my meals, I even slept a little better. In a way, knowing the truth was less suffocating than living in uncertainty. At least now I had something solid to hold on to, even if it hurt. He called me once, late at night. The number was unfamiliar, but his voice sent a shiver through me. Thank you for not blowing everything up that day, he said. His tone was soft, almost pleading. He promised we'd talk more, that he'd explain everything when the time was right. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. I hung up with a strange mix of hope and exhaustion. Maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something. But then my mother noticed the change in me. The way I'd drift off in thought. The restless pacing replaced by an odd stillness. She pressed me. Is something wrong? You're different. I couldn't hold her gaze. The weight of her lies sat between us like a wall. I didn't answer, but she saw enough in my silence. Her expression tightened. Fear flickered in her eyes. That's when it hit me. The calm wasn't real. It was the pause before the storm. Because if my father wanted to keep his secret, and my mother wanted to preserve her version of the past, then my choice to dig deeper threatened both their worlds. And they weren't going to let that happen quietly. The calm didn't last long. The calm cracked faster than I expected. It started with my mother. One evening, I came home to find her sitting stiffly at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched coffee in front of her. She didn't even greet me, just stared until I sat down across from her. Then she said it flat out. You've seen him, haven't you? The air left my lungs. I didn't answer, but the way my shoulders tensed gave me away. She sighed, almost like she'd been dreading this moment for years. You don't understand. I did what I had to do. We all did. I clenched my fists. You let me believe my father was dead. You let me bury an empty coffin. What part of that was necessary? Her jaw tightened. He left us. He abandoned you. Do you know what it would have done to you, growing up with that truth? You needed closure. Closure. The word burned like acid. Closure? I mourned him every day. I grieved a lie because you thought I couldn't handle the truth. She didn't flinch. You think the truth is better? That man doesn't deserve your pain. He doesn't deserve to be your father. I stood up so fast the chair scraped across the tile. That wasn't your choice to make. My voice cracked, but it was loud enough to rattle the windows. The argument spiraled from there. Yelling, accusations, tears neither of us wanted to shed. By the end, I stormed out, slamming the door behind me, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I drove without direction, just trying to breathe. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Please, don't tell her." It was him, my father. I pulled over, hands trembling, and typed back, "When?" He sent an address, an old diner outside town. Neutral ground. When I got there, he was already waiting, hunched over a coffee like a man carrying the weight of the world. Seeing him there in public, like an ordinary guy grabbing a late meal, made my skin crawl. For everyone else, he was just another stranger. For me, he was the ghost who never died. We talked, or at least we tried to. He explained how he'd left because the marriage with my mother had become toxic, unbearable. How he thought disappearing would be easier than dragging me through endless fights. He said he never wanted me to hate him, so he chose the clean break. I wanted to scream at him across the table, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I whispered, "You let me believe you were dead." His face twisted. "I didn't plan the funeral. I didn't tell them to lie. That was your mother. She thought it was the only way. I let her. And that's my greatest mistake." I couldn't process it. My mother blaming him blaming her, and me stuck in the middle, poisoned by both of their choices. Before I could press further, the diner door opened, and in walked my uncle. He froze when he saw us together. His face drained, then hardened. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed at my father. My stomach dropped. This wasn't an accident. He'd followed me. The three of us sat in tense silence that drew stares from nearby tables. My uncle leaned close, his voice low but sharp. "If this blows up, it destroys all of us. Do you get that?" I realized then it wasn't just a family secret. It was a conspiracy, a collective decision to erase my father from my life, to rewrite history itself. And now that I'd torn the veil off, everyone was scrambling to contain the fallout. I pushed back from the booth, shaking. "I'm not playing along. Not anymore. You all lied, and I'm done being the only one paying for it." Heads turned as my voice rose. My father reached out, my uncle grabbed my arm, but I yanked free and stormed out into the night. My breath came in ragged gasps, half panic, half rage. Because what I'd uncovered wasn't just a secret. It was a war, and I was standing right in the middle of it. What happened next made me question everything I thought I knew. After the diner blow up, silence wrapped around me like a coffin. No texts, no calls, no attempts to patch things over. Just absence. It should have felt like relief, but instead it hollowed me out. I stopped answering friends. Work became mechanical. I showed up, did what I had to, then disappeared. People noticed, I'm sure. A coworker asked if I was okay, and I almost laughed in his face. Okay. I'd spent 15 years grieving a man who was alive, then spent weeks watching my family unravel into liars and cowards. Okay wasn't even on the map. Nights were the worst. I'd sit in the dark, replaying every memory of my childhood. Birthdays where I blew out candles wishing my dad could be there. School events where I pretended it didn't hurt to see other kids with their fathers. Graduations, milestones, quiet Sunday afternoons. All of it haunted now, poisoned by the knowledge that he wasn't gone. He'd just chosen someone else. That thought ate at me. Not just the betrayal, but the implication. Maybe I wasn't worth staying for. Maybe I wasn't enough. Why else would a man fake his death rather than be my father? The shame was suffocating. I stopped looking in mirrors because every time I did, I saw his face staring back at me in my own reflection. For a while, I considered walking away from all of it. Cutting ties with everyone. My mother, my father, the entire extended family. Move to another state, start over. Pretend none of this existed. But then I'd think, if I did that, wouldn't I just be repeating his choice? Running instead of facing the wreckage I was born into. I hated the parallels. I hated him. And I hated myself for still wanting answers from him, for still craving the acknowledgement he owed me. One night, it got so heavy I sat at the edge of my bed with my phone in hand, thumb hovering over his number. I wanted to scream at him, demand to know why I wasn't enough, why he couldn't love me the way he loved those new kids. But I couldn't press call. My throat burned with words I'd never get to say. That was my breaking point. I realized the only way out was through. If I didn't force this into the open, it would rot me from the inside out. So I made myself a promise. The next time I saw my father, it wouldn't be in secret. It wouldn't be in whispers or late-night phone calls. It would be in front of everyone who had lied, everyone who had played a part. Because the truth didn't just belong to them. It belonged to me. And I was done being erased from my own story. That's when I realized what I had to do to end this once and for all. I chose a Sunday, family day, the day my relatives usually gathered at my mother's house for dinner, like some weekly performance of unity. It felt fitting. If they all wanted to keep living in lies, I would tear the mask off in the one place they felt safest. When I arrived, the air was thick with the smell of roast chicken and garlic bread. My aunts laughed in the kitchen, my cousins played on the living room floor, and my mother moved from table to table, orchestrating it all like nothing had ever been broken. But I wasn't here for food. I wasn't here for comfort. I was here for the truth. I stood in the doorway, scanning the room, my pulse pounding in my ears. My mother noticed first. Her smile faltered. She must have seen something in my face, because her voice dropped when she said, "What's wrong?" I didn't answer her. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the photo I'd taken days earlier, the one of my father standing outside his house, smiling with his new family, and placed it on the table where everyone could see. The room went silent. Forks froze midair. Conversations died. My uncle swore under his breath. I spoke slowly, each word sharp as glass. "He's alive. He's been alive this whole time. And you all knew." My mother's face drained of color. "This isn't the place." "No." I cut her off, voice rising. "This is exactly the place. Because you didn't just lie to me. You made me live half my life inside a story you wrote. You let me mourn, cry, bury a coffin that was probably empty. You stole my childhood so you could keep your secret tidy." Gasps and murmurs rippled around the table. My cousins stared wide-eyed. My aunts exchanged frantic looks. Then, like some twisted miracle, the front door opened. And there he was. My father. My mother must have called him, maybe hoping he could contain me. The sight of him stepping into that room, alive, real, undeniable, set off chaos. Chairs scraped back, voices overlapped, half the family demanding answers, half demanding silence. I didn't wait. I marched up to him, inches from his face. Tell them you abandoned me, then let them bury you alive in their lies." He looked at me, eyes glassy, lips trembling. For a moment I thought he might deny it, retreat into excuses. But something in him cracked. He raised his hands and said it aloud, his voice breaking. "I walked away. I let you think I was dead. I let them cover it because I was too much of a coward to face what I'd done." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. My mother broke down, sobbing. "We were trying to protect you." I spun toward her, fury cutting through every syllable. "Protect me? You didn't protect me. You crippled me. You let me mourn a ghost while the man who should have been there was laughing in another kitchen with another family." The room erupted, relatives shouting, some at me, some at my parents, some at each other. My uncle tried to calm everyone, but his voice was lost in the storm. Through it all, I stood shaking, but not with fear, with release. 15 years of grief, confusion, and silence poured out of me in one raw confrontation. Finally, I turned to my father one last time. My voice was quieter now, almost steady. "You're not dead, but you're not my father either. You gave that role away a long time ago." His face collapsed. He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. The distance between us was final. I grabbed my coat, pushed past the noise, and walked out into the night. The cold air hit me like a baptism. For the first time in years, I felt something close to clarity. The family could spin, argue, collapse, whatever they wanted. But I was done living in their story. This time, I would write my own. The fallout was immediate and messy. My phone lit up with missed calls and messages for days. Half from relatives demanding explanations, half from others begging me to let it go for the sake of family peace. I ignored most of them. For once, silence was my shield. My mother showed up at my apartment 2 nights later. She stood in the hallway, her face pale and tired, clutching a folder of old photographs like a peace offering. She wanted to talk, to explain again that her choices had been made for my own good. I listened, but I didn't forgive. Some wounds don't close just because the person who made them says sorry. I told her I needed space. She cried, but she didn't fight me. As for my father, he tried twice to reach me. First a call, then a letter slipped into my mailbox. The letter was long, full of apologies and rationalizations, promises that he'd always loved me in his own way. I read it once, folded it neatly, and put it back in the envelope. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away, but I also didn't respond. Sometimes not answering is the clearest answer of all. The rest of the family fractured along predictable lines. Some rallied behind my mother, insisting she'd only done what any parent would. Others admitted they'd known something was off but stayed quiet to keep the peace. A few, the braver ones, called me privately to say they admired me for dragging the truth into daylight, even if it made everyone uncomfortable. For weeks, I felt raw, stripped of the illusion I'd lived under for half my life. But strangely, I also felt lighter. Like carrying the truth, no matter how ugly, was easier than carrying a lie. I started small, long walks after work, dinners with friends I'd pushed away during the chaos. I told one or two of them the broad strokes of the story, just enough to feel less alone. Their reactions reminded me that betrayal doesn't define you. The choices of others don't erase your worth. Looking back now, I realize closure doesn't always come wrapped in forgiveness or neat family reconciliations. Sometimes closure is simply the decision to stop carrying someone else's lie on your back. My father still lives in that neighboring city. My mother still pretends she saved me by burying the truth. But I don't orbit their secrets anymore. I have my own life, my own story, and for the first time in years, it feels like mine. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: the dead don't always stay buried, and the living don't always deserve a place in your life. But the truth, however brutal, will always set you freer than a beautiful lie ever could.